Thank you very much for sticking around that late. Filling in for my PhD student, Ali Al-Karni, and I would like to acknowledge the third author, Dr. Krishna Gumeri, who's an associate teaching professor at Kansas State University with us. This presentation will bring in perspective the development of nonlinear analysis procedure for reinforced concrete deep beams using matrix methods. The presentation will start with a small introduction, then we will talk about the research objectives, the truss topology, and matrix analysis. Then we will address the progressive steps at key analysis points, and the main contribution of this talk, which is automating the force displacement computation for deep beams. We will talk about predicting failure modes, and go through some applications and discussions and conclude. ACI 318.19 define deep beams as either those with clear span to depth ratio of less than 4, or if it's in the case of eccentric beams, the shear span, the shorter shear span to depth ratio less than 2. Other researchers talked about A over H ratio of less than 3. You get deep beams, you get shear failure. If it's between 3 and 4, you get a transition zone. You get both modes fighting together to exist in the behavior. And then if it's greater than 4, to shallow beam theory, and flexural failure dominates. This picture shows on the left-hand side the stress trajectories, which could be very well represented by a truss topology. And using the strut and tie model, we can handle that. Now, you might ask yourselves, why is he presenting that when this is something very important, very known to us, which is using trusses to analyze deep beams? The answer is the main contribution of this study is the fact that we, because of these trajectories, we have nonlinear, or the linear strain profile is no longer valid. So we had some papers that were published recently that adjust or correct the linearized strain profile. So here in this, the main contribution of this study is we didn't need to touch strains. There was an innovative way of approaching the estimation of the yielding point and the estimation of the ultimate point. So we were able to capture the full response of the beams without messing with strains as an estimate, nonlinear strains as an estimate. We have the secant and the tangent stiffness methods, and this slide just to show the definition of each. And tangent method is an incremental step beyond the previous point, and secant method always connects to the origin, so it's a total approach. And we used both of them, and we showed that the results are very similar. The computational efficiency is a little bit different, though. So we want to develop an automated method using matrix structural analysis to predict the full response of reinforced concrete deep beams and identify critical yielding and ultimate points. We want to analyze nodal displacements using strut and tie model, eliminating approximations of nonlinear strain profile, and formulate a solution strategy using secant and tangent approach, and compare with experimental results. This procedure lends itself to writing a computer software very easily, which automates the process. This slide shows an inclined truss element, this one right here. So basically the height of the truss is JD, and JD is the height of the beam minus half of the height of the tie element minus half of the height of the horizontal strut element. And the height of the tie element, half of it, or the full amount, is easy to calculate. And the height of the horizontal strut can be found from the equilibrium equation at ultimate. Horizontal ties can be found as the area of the bars, and vertical ties can be found as the areas of the stirrups, but because we used 2 bays for the deep beam, because of the small or low A/H ratio, we had to lump some stirrups together to form, using tributary area to form the vertical tie. This slide shows ACI 318 method of calculating the size of the members, the struts, basically the horizontal strut and the diagonal strut. So just the nodal width at the nodal points, we'll take the minimum of that and use it for that purpose. Theta, the angle of the inclined strut, should be between 25 and 65. That's a rule in ACI 318 for strut and tie model. And the E's are the standard ACI values for concrete and for steel, the reported experimentally, or the typical values that we all know. The internal force members could be calculated by applying a unit load at the truss, because we don't know a priori how much the yielding load or how much the ultimate load is. So we apply a unit load, we find the forces per the unit load, and then we use just standard matrix analysis to find these internal forces for the effect of the unit load. And then in the next slide, and then later on, the next couple of slides, we will show how to convert that into values of the actual loads and the corresponding displacements. But the material behavior in concrete in compression is linear portion up to 45% of F prime C, and then Haugestad parabola and linear descending branch to 85% of F prime C. And then the steel is bilinear in nature, so it's linear elastic up to yielding, and then bilinear up to ultimate. This slope is found to be in the range of 1 to 6% based on the energy, equating the energy under that curve to the energy under the actual curve. Here is how we do the innovative part of the calculation. For the yielding load, what we do is we say, okay, what is the maximum stress that will cause this to yield in the horizontal tie and the vertical tie? We calculate a force based on that by taking the force in the Fy times As and dividing it by the internal force due to a unit load applied to the truss to get the yielding load that will cause this member to fail. Same way here with the concrete ones, 0.85 F prime C will be multiplied by the area divided by the load for a unit load, the internal force for a unit load, same way with the horizontal strut. And then we collect all the forces in all the members, and we take the minimum because that's going to be reached first. And then we take, so that's our PY, and we take PY and we multiply it by the maximum deflection due to a unit load. We get the actual deflection at yielding. And similarly, we will do the same thing for the ultimate load with the secant approach versus the tangent approach. The secant approach is a total approach, so we will take the actual stress times the steel area divided by the internal force due to unit load, and same way with the concrete members. And we take the minimum ultimate load of these, and we multiply it by the displacement due to a unit load. And then for the tangent approach, we take the incremental load beyond the yielding load, and we just take the difference between, if there was no yielding in that member, we subtract it from the yielding load to get to yielding, but if there was yielding in that member, we subtract it from the ultimate, that strain in the member, which we can calculate from truss analysis. After finding the PY or the PU, we can go back and plug in and get the elongation in the member, the strain and the stress. So we add these together and we do the same thing to get the ultimate displacement. This is where we calculate progressively the elongation. It's just a vector times the displacement due to a unit load. And then we multiply that elongation due to a unit load by the actual load, the actual yielding or ultimate load. And we divide it by the length of the member, we get the strain. And then the stresses from the constitutive equation, from the stress strain curve, we get it for steel and we get it for concrete. There is one interesting thing that we noticed for very deep beams, the fact that the indication that there's a shear crack popping up happens because the vertical tie yields before the horizontal tie, the main tie of the truss topology. And because of the fact that the truss member is constant, has constant strain, constant stress, we think that this whole thing is going to collapse because we lose the initial stiffness. But the concrete is surrounding the vertical tie everywhere, and it's intact except at the crack. So we do a weighted average, and we keep the same ES all the way to the actual failure of that vertical tie, because it's just localized at this area. And there's a formula that we derived to actually convert from the elastic behavior to the inelastic behavior to know when this vertical tie is going to snap. Predicting failure modes, we have 3 failure modes: the flexural failure mode in the tie or in the horizontal strut, the shear failure mode in the inclined strut or in the vertical tie, and then flexure shear, which is a combination of both. One of them competes with the other, reaches first. The other one is very close in the value of strain or stress to the ultimate. I would like to say that we compared with 7 different deep beams with different A/H ratios from 1 to 2.7. Some of them were 3-point bending, some of them were 4-point bending. And I don't have time to go through all 7, so I picked the first one and the last one, and then I show the results for all of them in a table. So this is A/H equals 1. We analyze half of the truss, half of the beam because of symmetry. This is the profile of the truss. This is the beam. And then we show the results. You see here that in this beam at this level, which matches very closely the experiment, the experiments for the popping of the shear crack, the vertical tie starts yielding here. This is the yielding of the vertical tie, this yielding strain, and this is the strain in the longitudinal tie, which is not reaching the yielding strain. So we continue the same ES, but we keep counting what's going on inelastically in the vertical tie at the crack level. And you see that the experiment matches the analysis for both the secant and the tangent approach very closely. Same way with the 2.7, A/H 2.7. We have half of the beam analyzed because of symmetry. And here we notice that the vertical tie does not yield. The horizontal tie yields first, and the vertical tie is way before. This is the horizontal tie, so it yields first here at this point, and the vertical tie has a very small strain. And then we go through the plateau all the way to failure. These two analyses in orange and green are the tangent and the secant. They are matching very closely. The only difference is that the secant requires more iterations to converge. The tangent is much more efficient computationally. And then if we were using elastic, perfectly plastic steel profile, we will not be able to use the tangent because the E will be 0 after yielding. This is the table that shows predicted versus experimental failure modes for all the specimens. This is what we call them in the work. This is what their names were in the original references. This is the experimental failure mode, and we matched all the failure modes in prediction. They are exactly the same. So the words are not exactly word by word, but this is horizontal strut failure, and this is flexural failure, and so forth. So in conclusion, the secant and tangent approaches align closely with the experimental results and accurately predicting the load and at yielding and ultimate. Different aspect ratios for deep beams were checked. From 1 to 1.5, the vertical ties yielded first, indicating that there's a shear crack band, very narrow band that caused a problem. The higher A over H ratios didn't have that issue. And then the ultimate and failure point was controlled by either 0.05 maximum strain in the steel or 0.003 maximum strain in the concrete. And the proposed procedure is capable of examining the beam subject to 3-point and 4-point bending. With that, I will stop and take questions.